But this is my show, okay? This is my show. This is my show. You understand? This is my show. This is my show.
At 69 years old, Arsenio Hall is finally ready to tell the truth about the guests who made his life hell during the golden era of late-night television. From LGBTQ activists who stormed his stage and turned live television into a battlefield.
I'm black, man. I'm the biggest minority you know about. I don't want to hear that gay trash, man. I got gay friends I've had on the show. Because you don't know them or it ain't who you want on the show, you got a problem with it.
To Vanilla Ice, whose desperate attempts to prove his street credibility became painfully uncomfortable.
Is that why you brought him out, just to show you have a black supporter? And
No, I brought him out because he's a friend of mine.
To Sinéad O'Connor, whose false accusations nearly destroyed his reputation decades later.
In the wake of Prince's death, Sinéad O'Connor is making damning allegations about the music icon's history with drugs. In a Facebook post, O'Connor says, 2 words for the DEA investigating where Prince got his drugs over the decades, Arsenio Hall.
These aren't just awkward interviews. These are the guests who genuinely made Arsenio Hall question everything about his career and his place in entertainment history. So, let's get into it. The most explosive moment in Arsenio Hall show history happened when LGBTQ activists stormed the studio during a live taping, creating a confrontation that would define Hall's legacy for decades to come.
Now, this ain't Merv. You didn't think I'd run from this, did you? This ain't Johnny. I ain't gonna run from it. I'm gonna deal with it.
The tension had been building for weeks. Critics had been questioning why Hall's show, which championed diversity and gave platforms to underrepresented voices, seemed to lack openly gay guests. What started as whispered criticism became a full-scale protest when activists decided to make their point during a live broadcast. Unlike other talk show hosts who might have cut to commercial or had security remove the protesters, Hall made a decision that would cement his reputation as someone who faced controversy head-on. He didn't run, he didn't hide. He stood his ground and addressed the criticism directly on live television.
I'm black, man. I'm the biggest minority you know about. I don't want to hear that gay trash, man. I got gay friends I've had on the show. Because you don't know them or it ain't who you want on the show, you got a problem with it.
Hall's response was raw, unfiltered, and completely unscripted. His passionate defense revealed the frustration of a black entertainer who felt he was being unfairly targeted despite his efforts to create inclusive programming. The moment showcased both his authenticity and his willingness to engage with difficult conversations in real time. The confrontation escalated when Hall challenged the protesters directly, asking them to name specific gay guests they wanted to see. When they mentioned Harvey Fierstein, Hall's response was brutally honest about the realities of booking guests based on content rather than orientation.
But this is my show, okay? This is my show. This is my show. You understand? This is my show. This is my show.
This wasn't just about guest booking. It was about creative control, artistic freedom, and the right of a host to determine their own programming. Hall's repeated assertion of ownership over his show became a defining moment of his career, demonstrating his refusal to be bullied into making decisions based on pressure rather than his own editorial judgment. The aftermath of this confrontation revealed something crucial about Hall's character. Rather than simply defending himself, he eventually apologized for any rudeness while maintaining his position on the substance of the issue.
I apologize to you sitting out there and you sitting here. It's rude and it's out of order. The one thing I would not do is discriminate against a guest because of preference.
This moment perfectly encapsulated why this confrontation made Hall's list of most hated guest experiences. It wasn't that he disagreed with LGBTQ representation. It was that the activists had chosen to disrupt his show and challenge his integrity as a host who had consistently championed marginalized communities. The incident forced Hall to defend not just his booking choices, but his entire identity as an entertainer and advocate. The protesters had transformed from guests into adversaries, creating a situation where Hall felt attacked in his own space by people who should have been natural allies. Few guests have provided more compelling television than Rob Pilatus and Fab Morvan of Milli Vanilli, but their appearance on the Arsenio Hall show came at the absolute worst possible time, right after their lip-syncing scandal had destroyed their careers and made them international laughingstocks.
What happened is we got a recording contract which was saying that we're supposed to record an album with different options. And we signed the contract, and after that, they came back to us and said, look, it's going to be different now.
Hall found himself in an impossible position. Milli Vanilli had been massive stars, with their infectious pop hits dominating radio and MTV. Their previous appearances on his show had been celebrations of success. Now, he was essentially hosting a public execution, watching two young men try to explain how they had deceived millions of fans. The cruelty of the situation wasn't lost on Hall. These weren't hardened criminals or calculating con artists. They were young musicians who had made a terrible decision and were now facing the complete destruction of everything they had worked for.
How about Friends? Did Friends disappear? Because you all had, I used to see you all out, and you had a lot of people with you.
No, not as much as you, Arsenio.
Oh, okay. Now, did all those friends start to disappear?
It was amazing. It was like a miracle.
Hall's questioning revealed the human cost of the scandal. Friends had abandoned them. Family members were embarrassed. The music industry had completely turned their backs on two people who had been superstars just months earlier. What made this interview particularly difficult for Hall was watching Rob and Fab's desperate attempts to maintain dignity while admitting to fraud. Their explanations about language barriers and contractual obligations felt hollow, even as their obvious pain made them sympathetic figures.
The day of the explosion, when he came out, so we never had any contact with them no more.
The ending was really sad. We sold worldwide 20 million records for Arista Records, and they couldn't even call us on the phone and letting us know, Rob and Fab, take your bags, there are 20 camera crews out there.
The interview became increasingly uncomfortable as Hall realized he was documenting the complete abandonment of two people by an entire industry. Arista Records, which had made millions from Milli Vanilli's success, couldn't even be bothered to make a phone call, warning them about the media storm that was coming. Hall later admitted that this interview haunted him because it forced him to participate in what felt like a public humiliation. Yes, Rob and Fab had deceived their fans, but watching them try to rebuild their lives while facing ridicule from every corner of society made Hall question whether his show was helping or hurting them.
And the moment to do it live has finally come. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, get ready, let's go!
The most painful part of the entire experience was the ending, when Hall gave Milli Vanilli the chance to perform live and prove they could actually sing. It should have been redemptive, but instead, it felt like watching wounded animals trying to prove they deserved to live. This interview made Hall's list not because Rob and Fab were difficult guests, but because their situation was so tragic that hosting them felt like participating in their public destruction rather than giving them a platform for redemption. But if Hall thought the pain of watching careers crumble was difficult, he was about to discover something even worse, dealing with legends who had let fame corrupt their basic humanity. Coming up next, we'll explore how one of music's greatest icons turned a simple interview into a masterclass in celebrity entitlement that left Hall questioning everything he thought he knew about his heroes. Diana Ross's appearance on the Arsenio Hall show should have been a triumphant celebration of one of music's greatest legends. Instead, it became a masterclass in celebrity entitlement and behind-the-scenes drama that left Hall questioning why he had ever booked her.
I've been actually begging for Stevie to write me a song since he was 14 years old. I'm not kidding. And
But you've never done a Stevie Wonder song?
No, I haven't.
The problem started before Ross even arrived at the studio. Her management team had submitted a list of demands that would have made a head of state blush: special lighting requirements, specific camera angles, pre-approved questions, and a ban on any discussion of the Supremes' drama or her relationships with Berry Gordy and Motown. But the real issues began during the interview itself. Ross seemed more interested in promoting her upcoming album than engaging in genuine conversation. Every answer felt rehearsed. Every anecdote seemed calculated for maximum publicity value.
Everything seems to work for you. I've seen you
No,
in
no,
concerts.
wait.
It's like you're like everything's so perfect. You never like your heel never goes in your dress and you fall on the ground. You know, has anything awkward and imperfect ever happened to you?
Hall's attempts to humanize Ross and show her vulnerable side were met with resistance. She seemed determined to maintain an image of absolute perfection, refusing to acknowledge that she had ever experienced the kind of embarrassing moments that make celebrities relatable to audiences. The breaking point came when Hall asked about her personal life and her relationship with her Norwegian husband. Ross's answers felt so scripted and promotional that Hall began to wonder if he was interviewing a person or a carefully constructed public relations campaign. What frustrated Hall most was Ross's unwillingness to engage authentically with his questions. Her story about meeting a man who didn't know who she was felt manufactured, designed to make her seem more relatable while actually making her appear more calculating. The interview reached its lowest point when Ross began what felt like a prepared speech about her charitable work and spiritual beliefs. Hall realized he was no longer conducting an interview. He was providing free airtime for a carefully orchestrated publicity campaign.
Yes, my baby love means love of my audience, love of the people that care about the work that we're doing here.
But who was your first love, though?
You mean a person?
Yeah. Who was that?
You mean,
that
are you
first guy
talking
you kissed
about man?
behind?
Or are you talking about man love?
Even Ross's attempt at spontaneity felt forced. When Hall asked about her first love, her answer about Smokey Robinson came across as another calculated move to associate herself with Motown royalty rather than a genuine personal revelation. Hall later described this interview as a lesson in how celebrity status can corrupt the authentic connection between host and guest. Ross wasn't there to have a conversation. She was there to deliver a performance, and her refusal to break character for even a moment made the entire experience feel hollow and manipulative. The final insult came after the show, when Ross's team complained that Hall's questions had been too personal, despite the fact that every topic had been pre-approved by her management. It was a level of entitlement that left Hall wondering why some celebrities bothered doing talk shows if they were unwilling to actually talk. While Diana Ross represented the problem of established legends who had lost touch with reality, Hall's next nightmare guest would come from the opposite end of the spectrum, a newcomer whose desperate attempts to prove his authenticity would create one of the most cringeworthy interviews in television history. Vanilla Ice's appearance on the Arsenio Hall show came at the height of his popularity, but it also coincided with mounting criticism about his authenticity and background. What should have been a celebration of his success instead became a tense interrogation that revealed the deep tensions in hip-hop culture about race, credibility, and commercialization.
Those that tried to hold the Iceman down can kiss my white ASS.
Yep.
Of course, you said the word and everything.
Oh, yeah, I said it.
Now you get a little time to expound on that.
The interview started with Hall addressing Ice's inflammatory comments from the previous night's show, where he had essentially told his critics to kiss his white ass. This immediate confrontation set the tone for what would become one of the most uncomfortable interviews in the show's history. Hall found himself in the difficult position of representing hip-hop culture while interviewing someone many in that community viewed as a culture vulture. Ice's defensive attitude and constant references to his street credibility felt forced and inauthentic to Hall, who had grown up in the culture ICE was claiming to represent.
I had to prove that I'm not a liar for something I'm not even proud about, getting stabbed. I did get stabbed 5 times, I almost died. It's something I'm not proud about. I am from the streets, and if you can't see that I'm from the streets, then you're blind.
The most cringeworthy moment came when ICE felt compelled to literally show his stab wounds to prove his street credibility. Hall watched in horror as a white rapper from suburban Dallas tried to use his trauma as evidence of authenticity, completely missing the point that real street credibility comes from community respect, not victimization. ICE's comments about white people lacking rhythm and dance ability were particularly problematic for Hall. While ICE seemed to think he was complimenting black culture, his generalizations felt condescending and revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of the community he was trying to join. Hall's frustration grew as ICE continued to make statements that showed his disconnect from hip-hop culture. His claims about attending the same high school as Luke Campbell, his defensive responses about his Dallas background, and his obvious discomfort with questions about his authenticity all pointed to someone who was more concerned with maintaining an image than being genuine. The lowest point came when ICE brought out Flavor Flav as some kind of credibility prop, using his friendship with a respected hip-hop pioneer to deflect criticism about his own authenticity. Hall found this display particularly offensive, as it reduced Flavor Flav to a token endorsement rather than respecting him as an artist.
Is that why you brought him out, just to show you have a black supporter?
No, I brought him out because he's a friend of mine.
Hall's questioning became more pointed as he realized ICE was using calculated moves to manipulate the audience's perception rather than engaging in honest conversation. The MC Hammer controversy, where ICE had allegedly talked negatively about his mentor, showed a pattern of opportunism that disgusted Hall.
I read some of the things that they said that I said bad about him, and I didn't say a lot of bad things about him. I never said anything bad about him. I have nothing to say bad about him.
What made this interview so difficult for Hall was watching someone profit from a culture while simultaneously misunderstanding and disrespecting it. ICE's success had opened doors for hip-hop in mainstream media, but his approach felt exploitative rather than appreciative. Hall later admitted that this interview taught him about the complexity of cultural appropriation in entertainment. While he wanted to support artists who brought hip-hop to new audiences, he couldn't ignore the problematic aspects of ICE's approach to the culture that had made him famous. If dealing with cultural appropriation in real time was challenging, Hall had no idea how much worse things could get when grief and social media combined to create false accusations that would threaten everything he had built. The next entry on his list wouldn't even be a traditional guest, but rather someone whose lies would force him into the courtroom to defend his reputation. In 2016, following Prince's death, Sinéad O'Connor made shocking accusations that would force Arsenio Hall into one of the most serious legal battles of his career. Her claims weren't just wrong, they were career-threatening allegations that attacked Hall's reputation and his relationship with one of music's greatest legends.
In the wake of Prince's death, Sinéad O'Connor is making damning allegations about the music icon's history with drugs. In a Facebook post, O'Connor says, 2 words for the DEA investigating where Prince got his drugs over the decades, Arsenio Hall.
O'Connor's Facebook post was brief but devastating. She claimed that Hall had been Prince's drug supplier for decades, providing no evidence beyond her own assertion. The timing couldn't have been worse. Prince had just died, the world was mourning, and O'Connor chose that moment to make unsubstantiated allegations against Hall. What made this situation particularly painful for Hall was his genuine relationship with Prince. The legendary musician had been a frequent guest on his show, and their friendship extended beyond television. Prince had trusted Hall's platform to premiere music videos, announce tours, and connect with fans in ways he rarely did elsewhere. The accusations hit Hall on multiple levels. Not only was his professional reputation under attack, but O'Connor was essentially claiming he had contributed to the death of someone he considered a friend. The emotional impact was devastating, combining grief over Prince's loss with fury over being falsely accused.
A rep for Hall says the claims are, quote, absolutely false, ridiculous, and absurd. O'Connor's ties with Prince date back decades. Her 1990 hit Nothing Compares to You was written by the Purple Rain singer.
Hall's legal team moved quickly, but the damage was already spreading across social media and entertainment news outlets. In the age of viral misinformation, O'Connor's accusations reached millions before any fact-checking could occur. Hall watched helplessly as his name became associated with Prince's drug problems despite having no involvement whatsoever. The irony wasn't lost on Hall that O'Connor, whose biggest hit had been written by Prince, was now attacking someone else who had been close to the musician. Her accusations seemed to come from grief and confusion, rather than any actual knowledge of Prince's struggles with prescription medication. Hall's decision to sue O'Connor for $5 million wasn't just about money. It was about forcing her to publicly acknowledge that her accusations were false. The legal action was necessary to prevent the false narrative from becoming accepted truth through repetition. The most frustrating aspect of this situation was that Hall couldn't defend himself without seeming to attack a grieving fan or diminish the seriousness of Prince's death. O'Connor had put him in an impossible position where any response could be twisted into something inappropriate. When O'Connor eventually issued an apology and retraction, it felt hollow to Hall. The damage had been done, the accusations had spread globally, and her belated acknowledgement of wrongdoing couldn't undo the harm to his reputation and emotional well-being. This incident made Hall's list not because O'Connor was a difficult guest. She had never actually appeared on his show, but because her actions demonstrated how celebrities could weaponize social media to destroy reputations without accountability. It was a modern nightmare that showed how quickly lies could overshadow decades of honest work. But while O'Connor's false accusations came from outside his show, Hall's most career-threatening controversy would come from a booking decision that seemed journalistically sound, but would create a political firestorm that nearly destroyed everything he had built. This next guest would prove that sometimes doing the right thing as a journalist could be the wrong thing for your career. The 1994 appearance of Minister Louis Farrakhan on the Arsenio Hall show created one of the most controversial moments in late-night television history. The booking alone generated massive criticism before Farrakhan even stepped onto the stage, and the aftermath would contribute to questions about whether Hall's show could survive the political firestorm.
One of the most controversial interviews you ever had was Farrakhan.
Yes.
I mean, people were literally...
That was controversial before he came on. I mean, just the fact that it was booked. I noticed it the day it was announced.
The decision to book Farrakhan wasn't made lightly. Hall had been hearing about the upcoming Million Man March and was genuinely curious about the man behind this massive organizing effort. His producing partner, Marla Kell Brown, was Jewish, making the decision even more complex given Farrakhan's history of anti-Semitic statements.
We knew our audience. We knew people were interested in him and the coming Million Man March that I had heard him talk about, which was my big interest.
What Hall didn't anticipate was the immediate backlash from booking the controversial minister. Critics questioned why he would give a platform to someone known for divisive rhetoric, while supporters argued that Hall was simply doing what journalists do, interviewing newsmakers regardless of their controversial status. The interview itself was less explosive than many expected. Hall conducted a straightforward conversation, allowing Farrakhan to explain his positions while occasionally challenging problematic statements. It was journalism, not advocacy, but the distinction was lost on many critics.
I'm not exactly sure why booking him caused people to deal with me any differently than Barbara Walters or anybody else that interviewed him.
Right.
Hall's frustration was palpable as he realized he was being held to a different standard than other journalists who had interviewed Farrakhan. Barbara Walters could sit down with controversial figures and be praised for hard-hitting journalism, but Hall faced accusations of promoting divisive rhetoric. The racial dynamics were impossible to ignore. As a black host interviewing a black leader, Hall was expected to either completely endorse or completely condemn Farrakhan's message. The possibility of simply conducting a journalistic interview seemed to escape many critics who viewed everything through the lens of political alignment. The aftermath was brutal. Advertisers pulled support, affiliate stations complained, and Hall found himself defending not just the interview, but his entire approach to hosting. The controversy overshadowed everything else the show was doing and created an atmosphere of constant scrutiny.
My resignation letter was long before the Farrakhan booking. That's on record. It went to a man named Kerry McCluggage at Paramount. And I was still trying to do great shows.
Hall later clarified that his decision to end the show had been made before the Farrakhan booking, but the timing created a false narrative that the controversial interview had caused his departure. This misunderstanding would follow him for years, with many believing that booking Farrakhan had cost him his show. What made this experience so difficult for Hall was the realization that his commitment to journalistic integrity had been twisted into something sinister. He had interviewed a newsmaker during a significant moment in American history, but his critics saw only a black host giving a platform to a controversial black leader. The Farrakhan interview taught Hall about the limits of what mainstream media would accept from a black host. While white journalists could interview controversial figures without their entire careers being questioned, Hall's decision to book Farrakhan was seen as an endorsement rather than journalism. These 6 explosive encounters represent just the beginning of Hall's nightmare guest experiences. Each one taught him something different about the entertainment industry's double standards, but together they reveal a pattern that would define his entire career. The impossible expectations placed on a black host trying to balance entertainment with authentic journalism. What connected all of these difficult guest experiences wasn't just their individual challenging nature, it was how they revealed the impossible expectations placed on Arsenio Hall as one of the few black hosts in mainstream late-night television. The LGBTQ activist Confrontation showed how Hall was expected to represent all marginalized communities perfectly, with any perceived failing becoming a major controversy. The Milli Vanilli interview revealed the painful reality of having to document people's public destruction for entertainment value. Diana Ross demonstrated how celebrity entitlement could corrupt the authentic connection that made talk shows meaningful. Vanilla Ice's appearance highlighted the complex racial dynamics of hip-hop culture and appropriation, forcing Hall to navigate between supporting the music he loved and questioning the authenticity of its messengers. Sinéad O'Connor's accusations showed how social media could weaponize grief and misinformation to destroy reputations. The Farrakhan booking revealed the double standards applied to black journalists and entertainers. Each of these experiences taught Hall something different about the entertainment industry, celebrity culture, and the unique pressures faced by black hosts in mainstream media. They weren't just bad interviews, they were defining moments that shaped his understanding of his role and limitations. Hall's willingness to face these challenges head-on, rather than avoiding controversial guests or difficult conversations, ultimately defined his legacy. He chose authenticity over safety, genuine dialogue over scripted promotion, and journalistic integrity over political convenience. The fact that these guests made his most hated list doesn't diminish their importance to his career or to television history. They represent the moments when entertainment intersected with real life, when the artificial boundaries of talk show conventions couldn't contain the complexity of human experience. At 69, Hall's reflections on these difficult guests reveal a host who never stopped learning, never stopped questioning, and never stopped believing in the power of authentic conversation to bridge differences and create understanding. Even when those conversations went terribly wrong, they remained more valuable than the safe, scripted scripted alternatives that dominate so much of modern media. These weren't just the guests Arsenio Hall hated. They were the guests who challenged him, changed him, and ultimately helped define one of the most important voices in late-night television history. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.